was for the Flex PD day.
Okay.
So that's gone. So we've only had one other one. So
Don't you have to make up the hours that were like late start or, I always thought that you had to do those. If you had like 3 of those, that
well,
3 2-hour days or 3.
we have enough hours. You got to be over 10,000 hours, 1,080 hours, and
Yeah.
we're at to start the year 1,156. So whenever, we don't get to count those hours. I track that, but that takes a lot of early outs and late starts to
Get to that point.
drop you 60 hours. I mean, you know what I mean?
So you're saying one day?
Keegan and Mark's senior year.
Yes.
That was like
That-
13 snow days that year.
It did happen that year.
Yeah, that was a lot.
That was bad, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the
Was that
seniors
3?
liked it.
Was that 3 years ago? Or
2023, yeah.
4? Yeah.
Yeah, the spring of 23.
Yeah, because we talked about extending the day like 15 minutes. Or
Yeah, we
20
didn't do
minutes.
early out PDs anymore. We tried to do that in-house just to gain some hours back.
But wasn't that the one they were like out because of snow days before Christmas break and then supposed to come back? And then it was like 3 more snow days.
Yeah, like
that was
January 2nd, there's another
Right.
one.
Yes.
yeah.
Good, perfect. Thank you. I won't check them.
But when you say one, so then we got to go one more day past what we're our originally scheduled out day.
I will eventually bring that
Okay.
to the board to decide. No, I mean, we could elect to forgive it. We
Okay.
could make it up.
Gotcha.
I always tell the staff, not all days are made equal, because
By March, or May 20, whatever.
yeah,
days are.
like
Anyways.
it depends how many you have. You know what, one,
Yeah.
because then you got to come back after Memorial Day versus if you had 4,
Yeah.
there's a lot. You know what I mean? So
No, I
that's
get
why I told the staff no decision's been made yet, because it depends how many
more we have.
more we have without trying to jinx us.
Yeah.
Like later this week.
Hopefully. Hopefully not. But the way we're going to spend this year,
Hello.
who knows?
All right, I got 5:30. We'll call the certified budget public hearing number 1 to order. First item of business is,
Sorry. Seeing if there's anyone here to speak.
okay,
I don't have anything to say. So.
They're all at the track.
Yeah. There is no one.
Yeah, there's a lot of people there.
yeah,
Okay, so there's no one here to speak.
all right, so first item on the agenda is certified budget setting tax rates.
All right, so thank you guys for being here tonight. This is our required tax hearing 1, since no one's here to speak. This is the, not that I'll reference it a lot, I'll talk about it in the presentation, but this is the tax notice that was generated through the Department of Management system that I'll talk about later, that got published in the paper. And it had some numbers on here. Not all of them are actually up to date, which I'll explain during the presentation. And I do have this on there. So I'm hoping to give you guys a little bit of insight, the public that watches this, to learn just about school finance and how we get the budget and everything like that. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. Please ask questions as we go, if you need to. So our budget presentation for this would be for next year's budget, FY27. Since we're in 26, that'll be starting July 1st of this summer through June 30 of the following year. So 2 things with this: to establish the property tax rate. That's ultimately what comes out of this that people want to know, right? For the most part, for the next school year, FY27, and to show the estimated expenditures. That's what we're required to do. School finance is unique, though. It's not just Stan and Kendra creating a budget and saying we need to go up 200,000 here. Much of our budget is pupil and formula driven. And I'll get into that a little bit more as we go to try and explain that a little bit more. This is one that I've used from, I got some slides and information from ISFIS, pretty similar to what I did in the past, but I tried to tailor it a little bit more to kind of explain the 2 halves of our budget and how we get there, okay? The big thing that drives our budget is enrollment, and we're going to start looking at that first. 2 things to know with enrollment. First, our head count enrollment, which is key, and I'm hoping when we get into that number that'll look familiar. Not that you have our enrollment numbers memorized, but our head count enrollment, or people will say resident students, resident enrollment, or certified enrollment. The number that we had last fall in October drives our budget for next year. Okay, that drives a lot of our funding. Okay, also a big part of it is, which we don't talk about as much as, and we don't really have control over, is our special education weightings and some of the other supplemental weightings, and I'll give a brief explanation of that when we get there, as our count, which I put in quotations there, but that goes into the formula as well. And those are two big pieces. That supplemental, specifically special ed, and then just our headcount enrollment is a big piece of our enrollment. Okay, supplemental weightings, what I mean by that is other things that add additional students. Okay, some examples of this outside of special ed, not talking about that, is English language learners. There's a formula depending on how many, the level they're at in ELL students. We get some additional money for that. Operational sharing. Those that have been on the board for a while, we've talked about that, but there's certain positions that we get extra students for when we share those positions. We share transportation and HR, Chrissy Ackerman's position, Amos's position, and then we get some additional students. So that's what operational sharing, and then a third way you can get is reorganizational. That doesn't really impact us, so that's not part of it, but that's how you can get that. Our preschool budget is separate from this, but I've added a few components of that just to show. Preschoolers are counted different because they go half days, so they count as half a student, basically. So when you see an enrollment of 40, it doesn't mean you have 40 preschoolers, you really have 80, actually.
Oh, 80 in it.
Yes, because they're each a half. Yep. So we'll look at that in turn. So this should at least look familiar, not that you have it, but for the current year, our enrollment was 669. That head count or certified enrollment last fall was 623. That's what the enrollment we'll use for our budget for next year, 623. We've talked about that being down 45 students. Not that I'm saying this number isn't shocking, but it shouldn't be a shock to you because we've mentioned it before, okay? Being down 6.8 students. And this is just kind of going back to and fitting it in a graph that at least looks somewhat, just showing what our enrollment trend is. You can see from 16 to 19 held relatively flat, down a few, okay? And then kind of took a dip and flat, but through from FY24 now to FY27, you go in there down 60 plus students in there. So kind of based, I don't have all the numbers for this, but based on the last meeting, I think, Arthur, you asked this question. I don't remember for sure. But just what does that compare like trends to the state and nationally? Mm-hmm. I don't have a nice graph for nationally, but it did show that was down, maybe not as steep. Okay. But we do have for the state. So I just went back this far because it took a while to dig up the data, but going through FY20, why do you think there was a big, why do you think there was a big drop between FY20 to FY21?
Well.
Okay. Took a while to adjust from that, but that was when COVID happened, right? And you have a lot of people that didn't return after that, okay? The one thing that's different to compare here, FY27, I have a number in there because that's a budget number. That was our enrollment this year, okay? But FY27's number came from this year. The state's enrollment isn't on a budget, it's what's done annually. So that's why they don't have anything for FY21. So they're really like a year off, does that make sense? Our budget FY27 is like the enrollment here. But you can see the last handful of years, even statewide, the numbers going down. Mm-hmm. And I said, this past year when the state said, and this is K-12 public students, and depending on when you look, because their numbers change throughout the year, but when you look, they're down that roughly 7,000 to 8,000 students statewide. So just some numbers, because I know you guys asked that before, and so I thought I'd throw this in here a minute. I don't have anything for nationwide, but that was that neat because it was kind of all over the place here. But
Can you back up one slide?
yeah. Whoops, sorry. Good grief. Statistics show nationwide we're down slightly enrollment as well.
Okay.
Got it?
Yep.
Okay. I'll come back to this, but special ed weightings were up, okay? This is special ed weightings. This doesn't mean we have 90.1 special ed students, and last year we had 83.7, okay? Special ed students, in general, they're a part of our count. They're one student like anyone else. But when they qualify for special ed, we get some additional funding. And that's what this is talking about. And it's funded per student, okay? So that 8,000 and change number we get per student, okay? What the weightings are, I don't have this memorized, so I put this on the bottom here. So there's 3 different levels that they're qualified for on IEPs, level 1, 2, or 3. So a level 1 student gets a weighting of 1.72. So for someone, your traditional special ed student, we get about 0.72 of a student's additional funding. For someone who's a level 2, the funding level's 2.21, so we're getting really 1.21 additional. Okay, the first person I'm talking is because that's part of their account, right? You see what I'm saying? And then someone who's a level 3, we get 2.74 additional students worth of funding. That's where that's coming from. So when you factor that in for all our students as of the certified count day in October, we're having about 90.1 additional students worth of funding for special ed purposes. Okay? Now, how does that compare for the last handful of years? Okay? I think our staff would agree with this, but as our student enrollment has gone down, our special ed weighting has gone up. So if you just had to make a glancing notice at this, what do you get from that? Yeah, we're having more kids in special ed, okay? But, I mean, pretty obvious. It doesn't mean that it's gone up by 30 kids, but it's 30 students worth of weighting, right? Some of it could be some students who maybe level 1 moved to a level 2, right? More students identified. Statistics would show usually, not hard and fast, but usually as your free and reduced or your socioeconomic status goes up, the higher your free and reduced rate, more than likely the higher special ed count you'll have as well. That's pretty common. Okay? Supplemental weightings, we're down about a student, and I'll show for that in a second here. No cause for concern or anything. Primarily driver of this is operational sharing and our EL funding. Really overall, if you look back to FY22 to now, you're like, oh, we're down roughly 3 students. Actually, we're probably up. In FY22 and FY23, we were sharing head maintenance with GLR, and it was decided we don't do that anymore, so we don't have that position shared anymore. That was 4 students. So if we continue to do that, add 4 students on this year, we'd be at 35. So my point with that is we've held pace or even maybe slightly gone up in our ELL population and and the additional sharing that comes from that. Because at that point we had 12 students worth of shared positions, and now we're at 8. So if you'd add that 4 back on here, really our operational sharing here, or in supplemental sharing, has gone up. Okay? So overall, our total weighted enrollment is 744. This is a report that'll go to state. We don't use this number anywhere. There's no dollar amount that's multiplied by that. I don't know why in some forms the state recognizes that, but it's a number. Because really the important thing is our certified enrollment, which we'll talk about, we've talked about in the past. We take that times our cost per student. We'll come back to our special education weighting. If you kind of remember, that's at 90, and our supplemental weighting's at 31 and change. And do we have 0.8 of a special ed student? No, remember the weighting is fractional. It's not like we have just someone's foot in special ed or something like that, right? Or how do you get 0.195? It's fractional. There's a formula, and I couldn't even tell you what it is, but it's a component based on the number of kids you have in ELL, the scores they have on their ELPA testing, and the services they receive. There's a formula the state determines that's how much additional funding you get. Okay? So over the last handful of years, okay, overall this total weighted enrollment has gone down, but it hasn't gone down at the same rate that our certified enrollment has, because we've talked about our special ed weightings have gone up, and even our supplemental and operational sharing weightings have gone up. So that's why that hasn't gone down in a like rate of decline. You could almost say percentage-wise it's gone up. Okay. Preschool enrollment. Preschool has some funding that's shared, but some that's separate. So just to show that, for this current year, FY26, our preschool enrollment's at 16 and a half. For next year, based on this year's count, it's at 17. So once again, we don't have half a student, but they count for funding as half a student. So you could say last year, for this year's funding, we had 33 students, and then this year on count day, we had 34, right? Because each one counts as 0.5. Okay?
Is preschool required?
No, it is not.
Kid can go right to kindergarten.
They would not have to do preschool first. They could.
Okay.
Yep. In terms of compulsory attendance, once you're at age, I think it's 7 or 6, you have to attend. Preschool's not compulsory until once you attend, then we have to take attendance, and if
Yep.
you don't attend, you comply by those laws. But it's your choice whether to send them or not. Some may, some might. They might go a different preschool option.
Yep.
It's called the Statewide Voluntary Preschool, SWVP.
And do you have to have a certified preschool teacher to count
Yep.
those kids too?
Yep.
All right. 'cause-
Yep. And what you're thinking of, why we didn't have that is some of the flow through Head Start.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
it flows through. That's where that happened when they didn't have that 1 year. Some additional students that way, right?
Maybe you explain that to them with how that works, or maybe you don't want. What was this? We didn't have a teacher that was certified, so we couldn't.
In Head
count.
Start, so
Okay.
there's some funding that they get through us, and that goes in part of our enrollment. That's not part of this. Well, the 1 year they didn't have someone that was certified, so that we couldn't count those students. And so that was an audit adjustment the next year, basically.
Yeah.
Is that the simple way to say it?
Yeah, I think so.
Easiest way, yeah.
Yeah.
Not a pro at that one by any means, but, okay? All right, it's preschool. So, that's the basis. We have to have enrollment to drive our budget, right? That's the important thing to remember. Not that you'll have all those numbers memorized, but that's what it is. The biggest part that we're talking about really for our budget is spending authority, okay, or your authority, and I've used that term before. You know, I'll say the biggest thing in education finance is your UAB, your unspent authorized balance, or your unspent authority, okay? So a budget is created by simply generating how much authority you have for that next year, okay? And we get that through the number of students multiplied by what each student is worth. And that's a weird phrase, but that's how the assembly puts it. And not that we have a personal value that this kid's worth more than the next, but worth in terms of budget and dollars, right? The state of Iowa sets that as a dollar amount. And there's different components to our general fund that are set by the state. And so I'm gonna talk, that all goes into it. And you're gonna see, okay, Stan, you said X amount, but our general fund is this amount. Why is there a difference? So I'll talk about that. These are all the pieces in our general fund that go to authority. The three that you might not know the team's terms, but you should be most familiar with are the top three. Our regular program district cost, which is, we've talked about before, that's taking that district cost per pupil. This year it's 8,000 and change times your certified enrollment, okay? The budget guarantee, we've mentioned that, and I'll go over that in a second. Those two added together are the third line. At various times, we've maybe talked about some of those other things, but there's not a lot of choice that goes into that. All that added up comes to our final combined district cost. Think of that as our total general fund costs or the total authority, and I'll show you how we get there. And I won't go through everything line by line, but we'll get an overview. So I'll kind of start at the end here in a second and work backwards. So I've showed this screen in a different presentation before, but this is just for line one of the spending authority here. How do we get that? You take that district cost or state cost per pupil, which we know now is 8,148, and you take that multiplied by your certified enrollment from last fall, and that's the base number for our general fund for next year. So that comes to $5,081, $5,081,093. So a little over $5 million. Okay, we'll keep that number in mind there. Now, keep that in change. That's what I'm saying. That's the base cost here for our general fund, right? Okay. From the current year to next year, that number's gone down. 5% decline. What's the primary reason that number's gone down?
Big class going out.
Yeah. However you want to say it. Decrease in enrollment, right? Yep. Our certified enrollment this past fall was 45 students less than a year and a half ago, right? Because this fall was already half a year ago. So that's the reason for that. It's not Stan and Kendra saying we want $300,000 less. That's driven by a formula, okay? The state says for the next year, you're guaranteed, it's called a budget guarantee, to at least be that 5.3 million, okay? So we qualify for the budget guarantee this year. We approved that at one of our board meetings, the resolution that if we'd qualify, we would get that. For the current year, we didn't qualify because we didn't need it. We had an increase in enrollment and funding. For next year, we will have that. Most years, that all comes through property taxes, which I'll talk about in a little bit here. Okay, so that's why that's a 100% increase, because we didn't have the budget guarantee this year. Okay, So you add those two together to get your regular program district cost, and you're gonna notice this current year is 5.346 million. For this coming year, FY27, it'll be 5.399 million, almost 5.4 million, right? That goes up 1%. Well, that makes sense because your budget guarantee says you get 101% of the funding the year before. That's why it's an increase of 100. Now, this is where I was going to use that laser, Jamie, but it's gone here. The thing to remember moving forward is, so this will be our number next year. The year after, the budget guarantee is based off this number. It's before that, right? We don't get 101% of this number. That's one time. We could be on the budget guarantee, I hope not, again, the following year, but it won't be 101% of that number. It'll be this number here. So keep that in mind.
Is there a limit to that? When you just say you have
Like
a slightly
3 years.
declining enrollment consistently, you can
You can, the budget guarantee, you're always at 101% of your regular program district costs from the year before.
regardless of the years.
The thing is, what some people don't realize is it doesn't factor in the budget guarantee. So
Yeah,
you
right.
don't, right.
No, I get that,
Yep.
but it's not like you're on 5 years and like,
As of right now, no, there's not a limit on that. Ideally, you would not be on it 5 or 10 years in a row, but
just,
in theory, it could happen
right, it could. And
to
then
any. Yes,
And regardless of what they set as the SSA amount too, right?
right.
Yeah.
Yep. Now, let's say you have a slight decline in enrollment, or you held steady, or you were down, like for us, let's say 5 students. If they set SSA high enough, even if we're down 5 students, if you increase the funding
Yeah,
per student,
you'd be above it.
you would be above it, right? Right. So that brings us, those are that top 3 lines, so that comes to 5.4 million, okay? Before you look at all this, look at the bottom. The overall spending authority for our general fund is gonna come to 8.2 million. Now you're like, Stan, you've been preaching all along, those top 3 numbers there, that our TSS time enrollment is a little over 5 million, plus the budget guarantee. Okay, what are all these other numbers? Okay, a lot of them are formula driven. I won't explain every one in detail, but some of them. Do you see where it says district cost for supplemental weighting? Okay, do you remember our supplemental weighting from last year? This year was down just slightly. Well, notice that number's down just slightly. Okay, here's how they came up with that. Our supplemental weighting was 31 students and change. If you take that 31 students and change times the $8,148, you're going to come up with $254,000. Okay. The next line, special education. Last year, $668,000. This year, $733,000. Where does that number come from? Do you remember our special ed?
Well, yeah,
like
but you got the
90.
1.2, the 2.4,
Yep.
and the 3 point whatever.
Yep.
So just
They added up to, it was a little above 90.08. If you take that 90 number times the 8,148, you're going to get 733,000. So those are sources of authority for our general fund. Those two added together, that supplemental weighting for special ed, operational sharing, and the ELL, you add those two together, right there, that's $1 million, roughly, right? I'm rounding, okay? Just short of. The next line, teacher salary supplement. I haven't called it teacher salary supplement very often. When we've talked about it, I know Jamie's referred to it. We use the acronym. Do you know what the acronym is?
TSA,
Yeah, or TSS.
TSS.
Yes, TSS. That's additional funding the state has to fund teacher salaries, teacher salary supplement. They provided some additional funding the previous 2 fiscal years to bring teachers up. If you guys weren't on the board then, but if you remember, they staggered over 2 years to get teachers up, starting pay to $50,000. Year 1 was $47,500, year 2 was $50,000, and then veterans up to $62,000. That's some of the funding. Okay, that's that, $838,000. Now you'll notice that stayed the same from this year into next fiscal year. Okay? The reason is, in essence, on that, we're on the budget guarantee because that's funded per pupil, but our enrollment went down. It would be determined in future years what that number looks like. They haven't fully
Because of
given-
enrollment or
because of enrollment, right?
Okay.
Yes.
Did that have anything to do with their adjustments up of salary?
No,
No.
they don't. Once we get the numbers, they don't even factor that in. They gave us the money the first year,
Yep.
and then the second year, and then after that, that's what you have, and then it goes according to the student enrollment you had, and they figured out what that is per student. It's
Okay.
funded per student, and so that dollar amount per student is different for every district.
That's what I was just gonna ask.
Yes,
And it all goes
and it
back
can be
to when it initially
wide-
was done?
Correct. You just figured out in about 10 seconds the whole issue with it. Yes.
Insane.
So you could have a district next to you that has a wildly different number than you do,
Yeah.
because maybe you had a lot more veteran staff than they did
Yep.
who weren't at 62,000. So you needed a lot more funding to bring them there. So
And they've
therefore, you
gone
might have
up.
got a lot more funding the first year than they did, or they might have more than you. Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. We want to pay teachers. That's not my statement with this. I'm just saying,
But it's could be very different based on a period of time.
Yes.
And that's it. Like,
correct.
To manage a budget 4 years out, you have no idea.
Right, exactly. And I think moving forward, there's unknown ramifications that are going to happen. Not at Sibley, I mean statewide.
Yeah.
Not at Sibley or Cheating, excuse me, statewide. A lot of the other lines are just formula driven. We get some additional PD money that's a formula driven, not something that we set, okay? Teacher Leader Supplement, that's formula driven, but TLC, we fund our 2 instructional coaches, Barb Williamson and Katie Schroeder, who just walked in, and then some of the curriculum department heads like Brenda and Daryl here the other night, they get a little additional stipend to be science department heads. That comes through that teacher leadership compensation. There's some AEA funding. The other one I'm going to point out to you that will come to later way on the bottom where it says FY26 SBRC modified supplemental amount dropout. Okay, that's for what's called the dropout and at-risk, or that we call it ARDO, at-risk dropout prevention. We have to have a yearly plan we approve, and then we ask you guys to approve the supplemental amount. That's factored as a percentage of your general fund. Okay, if you guys don't approve that at a board meeting, that's $250,000 in funding that we don't get. Okay, that's authority that's added in. So you add all those up. So yes, the base program of 8,148 times our student enrollment is 5 million, but really our overall, the combined district cost for our general fund comes to 8.2 million, which is an increase of 135,000 from the year before. There's a few things in that authority in the general fund you can control, but you can really see for the most part, there's not a lot of levers you can control or change. A lot of it's formula driven. Really, you could say, oh, we don't want that at-risk money. I don't know why you would. Or do something like that, but most of that is just formula driven already. So that, excuse me, so that's really what we're looking at for our general fund right there without any other things added onto it, okay? So I just pulled out some things. The TLC, that number stayed the same. The reason it did is because our enrollment went down, and there's a factor or a formula for that, and so they kept that the same. Kind of its own version of the budget guarantee, guaranteed to stay the same. Okay. Our dropout prevention went down slightly. That's because it's a percentage out of the general fund. Well, when our general fund went down, that funding, and the percentage stays the same, you're going to get a slightly less dollars, so that's why that went down. We have that maxed out, but due to declining enrollment, that went down. That could go up if you had increasing enrollment. Okay? So overall, that combined district cost, that went up 1.7% compared to the current fiscal year to the proposed one for next year. Adding that all up, that difference was about 135 grand. Okay? So overall, this is just a pie chart showing that. And we talk about the regular program district cost, which is that funding per student multiplied by the cost per student plus the budget guarantee. But you can see that's not the whole piece of the pie for the general fund. All those other pieces contribute to that as well. Okay? Now, that brings us here. That's the authority. I haven't talked anything about taxes or how that's funded. But that's how we have to start.
Yep.
Okay? So some comments on that authority, and then, these are the challenges, then I'll have some positives and see if I've confused the heck out of you already or not. So our enrollment trends, here's kind of some of our challenges. Enrollment trends, unsteady, and we're not unique in this, but it makes it hard to predict future enrollment trends. Not that we want a slow descent down, ideally be up or even holding steady, but we've taken some big swings, down 40, up 20, down 40, just in the last 3 years. And before that, that just makes it hard to predict what that's going to look like in the future, right?
Do we have you don't know what's incoming though. Like, so you had a preschool number.
Yeah.
What's that difference to the class that's leaving?
So,
If we just took the preschool number.
well, preschool, because some of the kids will continue on the next year for preschool because maybe they qualified
For 2 years.
TK.
well, not even that, but maybe they were identified special ed, so they're in preschool and then they can go a second year. And then you'll have some kids that go on to TK. We have a section of TK this year and 2 of kindergarten. Here's what also makes that challenging. We're full day TK. We weren't always that. We've just started that, which is great. But some of the kids in TK will be ready to go on for first grade, but some of the kids in TK will elect to do kindergarten the following year. And you don't always know that. We can't tell them you have to know that by the time the budget's in place. Like,
Gotcha.
you know what I mean? So
But basically, on your question, I think this year's graduating class is in the 50s, pretty close.
I think so, if I remember right. I haven't looked at the
Right.
number. I haven't looked at it in a
And
while.
I think we're
but
getting 34.
That was a preschool number.
That was a
But
preschool
preschool
number.
number.
It's not, just curious, like you
But
said.
There could be some TK in there though.
There could be, but you're.
I think the anticipated, not counting TK, the anticipated kindergarten class next year would be under 40, kind of similar to this year.
So without anybody leaving or moving in, you're looking at
There could be a lot,
10 to
right,
15 different.
depending on how you look at it, yep.
Okay.
Now, what's confusing about that is the following, like this year it'll happen too. Let's say all of those kids in kindergarten go on to first grade, but sometimes you'll have some TK kids that do that as well. You know what I mean? So then your first grade number is a little higher than your kindergarten number. Just depends what they're ready for, what we have room for.
Gotcha.
Those conversations that the preschool and TK teachers and Mr. DeZale have with families and so forth, because, yeah, it's not the same for every person.
Every kid.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's all part of, that's what makes enrollment trends hard, especially a district our size. You just don't know those things. And you can't control, as much as you want to keep kids here, you can't control when they're coming in, because there's a lot of factors, that birth rate,
Yeah.
housing, that the first 5 years that we don't see them for, we have no control over, right? So, continued inflation is high. It's in the upper 2s or 3%. Iowa law requires 3% or whatever consumer price index is at whichever is lower when you have settled. Now, we had a great settlement this year, don't get me wrong, but if that continues, the last handful of years, the inflation rate's been higher than what they've set SSA at. So if you're going to settle just at a minimum of where the consumer price index is at, or 3%, and SSA is below that, that's going to put you dollars behind every year in your budget. And that leads into the next thing, the uncertainty with SSA. This year was 2%, but it was set late, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. It was set after we had to put in the initial budget numbers this year, which makes things really hard to predict. So when they do that late, and you don't know what that's going to look like, that makes setting budgets hard. And then funded and unfunded mandates. There's some mandates when they increase teacher pay that we get some additional funding for. Some of the times there's mandates we don't get any additional funding for. I've learned, our friends from ISFIS have said, anytime the legislation says that this is a funded mandate, it generally means it's not funded. They're just saying it's funded through the money you're already getting. So it's never a good comment when you have some additional legislation comes through that said this is a funded mandate, because it generally means you won't get new dollars. So those are all challenges that we and many other schools. Some strengths, we're still in a strong financial position that allows us to make time. We don't have to make any rash choices. We appreciate that. The changes we've made in the past have had an impact on our 5-year projection moving forward from 3 years ago to now. So we're looking forward to continue to do that. We have great employees here. I can't stress that enough, who are resourceful and made the best of this. Have been very receptive as we've been talking through these things. Right now, this won't always be the case, but for our school our size, other than one grade level, we have 3 sections at all grades in the elementary. Not all schools our size can say that, but we do, other than one grade level. And then our budget challenges and the issues that we have, honestly, are being discussed all over at schools in our area, just in our area, if not the state. These aren't unique conversations that are just happening at Sibley Cheatham. They're all over, okay? questions overall on authority now, before I kind of connect that to the money side?
Makes sense to me.
Okay, so we've generated, that's the authority. Now we got to talk, how do we get the dollars for it, the actual dollars for it, right, backed up. Okay, and the question that most people have if they were here tonight, property taxes. So funding comes through, for each student, is through a combination of local property taxes and what we call state aid, money that comes from the state. Statewide, property taxes make up about 1/3 of your general funding. That can vary by district, but overall, if you look statewide, it's about 1/3, okay? Which is the general fund, which pays for your teachers and instructional programs, right? And then the mix is determined, how does that vary, is determined by really what your local property assessments are and that rate compared to your students, okay? So just because you maybe have lower property assessments than a neighboring district doesn't mean automatically you have to pay higher taxes, because you don't know how that relates to students. So if all things were equal and you had the same number of teaching staff and students, and our district had and the neighboring district had, it would come down to what's the total property assessed value in your district. So I'll give an example, us in Okoboji. Let's pretend we had the same number of students and we have the same number of teaching staff, so in theory, the same costs,
They'll get more money.
okay? Their property, because they have way higher assessments, their property tax rate will be significantly lower because they have way more assessed value, right? Okay, now, there's differences because their district's bigger and they have more students, right? But that's an extreme example, but it's an easy one because it's local, right? Overall, we're right in the middle to a higher, probably above average in our total assessed value per student. There's definitely districts when they say property poor, it doesn't mean all the property in the district is poor, but that's a term they'll use. It just means the rate of the assessed value or the property in the district is lower per student compared to others. I believe Okoboji and Spirit Lake have the two highest assessed property values per student in the entire state. And if I remember right, it's not even close. That's an obvious example. So that goes into that. So for us, there's 5 points that make up the levy, okay? You have the uniform levy, which we've talked about, but you might not remember, in the additional levy. I'll mention that in a second. And then the instructional support levy, which we haven't mentioned, but I'll talk briefly. The bottom two things, you're probably like, we've never talked about it, and we haven't, because we don't qualify it for it. Our cash reserve is too high, so we can't even cash reserve for additional cash. That might be a conversation we have 2, 3, 4 years down the road, but we don't qualify for that now, okay? So how that comes is you have to know what your total taxing authority is, that going back to that 8.2 million number, okay? That's called your combined district cost. So everyone pays, it starts out, the uniform levy, everyone pays $5.40, okay? All districts, all assessed taxable property across the state. You figure out, I don't figure it out, but formula and people smarter than me do, they figure that out, and then they add state supplemental aid in that to get you to 88.4% of your needed dollars. Okay, the remaining 11.6% then comes from that additional levy. That's what I meant here by the additional levy. Okay, so you can see, like in our district, getting that additional levy compared to, I'll go back to my example, Okoboji's, is going to look different. And that's why rates can vary so much between districts because of that. Okay, going back to Okoboji, the $5.40 levy, probably just that brings them pretty close to, they probably don't need much state aid because they're generating so much in funds through property taxes. I don't know that, but I can make that assumption. Okay, so that's how they calculate that. Okay, so for us, we know for that 8.5 million and change, we need 3.5 million and change in property taxes, which is an increase of 463,000. Now I'm going to tell you that number's not accurate because of when this was published, the state hadn't finalized everything yet, and I'll explain why in a second. But that number includes the budget guarantee, and the budget guarantee is always all 100% property tax. What's unique is this year the budget guarantee for the next fiscal year is going to be covered by the state. But they didn't have that in place when we sent out the first tax notice. Super confusing. Okay? So our general fund, or what we have to levy for or ask property taxes on, basically, went up 463,000. However, 300 some thousand of that is from the budget guarantee, which, when things are adjusted, won't actually come out of property taxes. So that's why that's not accurate, but it's accurate as of when we had to prepare this, which
State's
makes
really
things
helping
really
us out here.
confusing. What's that?
So the state's really helping us out here.
No kidding. I thought we'd have maybe some people asking about that, to be honest. Okay? So our levy rate just for the general fund then, so for the current year compared to next year, this is where it's at as in when we publish this. It's not accurate because it's not updated from the legislation from the state. So that bottom 5.4, that's same both years because that's called your uniform levy. Okay? That additional levy is, I'm going to go back, what they're talking about is that top part, that property tax local levy, and then like any budget guarantee, that additional levy. That's what they're talking about in red. So for this current year, that's $2.50 and change. Next year it'd go up to $3.01. Okay? Then there's an additional piece, that little green, that's about 36 cents for the current year, 35 next year. That's called the instructional support levy. That's an additional general fund funding we can get. It's a percentage of your general fund that we have to approve by board resolution. It's an additional tax, but we have to do that once every 5 years. So we're about in the middle of that. I haven't talked about it a lot this year because there's no need to renew it. We have it. It's in place. I think it'd be not this next year, but the year after, we'll probably talk about it and renew it and do the paperwork for that. That's where that comes from. So that provides us property tax, the funds we need for the general fund. That $8.72 is really worthless though, because that's not accurate, but it was when we had to publish this. But
Do you know what it's gonna be?
we have a rough idea, yes, the overall rate. I don't exactly know with the general fund on its own, but I do, overall I do, which I'll get to.
Okay, sounds good.
I'd tell you on the general fund, but I don't know. I'd be shooting in the dark. Okay? Now, there's additional levies outside your general fund because you should know our levy this past year, our tax rate was not $8.20, right? It was higher than that, right? Okay? So what are some other funds? That's what we're going to talk about and what's allowed under Iowa code. Okay? Here's some other general funds, and some of them are leviable, some of them are not. Management fund, I've mentioned that. There's a levy for the management fund. PEPL, hopefully we all know about PEPL. Okay, PEPL has a levy. There's something called PEARL. I'll tell you, we don't have it, and if you don't have it, you can't add it. It's being phased out, only the schools that have it, but it's something about, it has to do with playgrounds and taxes for that you combine with the city. We can't get it, but some districts do have a PEARL levy. The activity fund, you'll hear us talk about the activity fund, however, there's no levy for it. We don't get any state dollars. The activity fund is solely funded through, do you know what?
Tickets?
Ticket sales, right? Like activity tickets, things that come in, or donations. Those are your two so when we're talking about, like Spirit Club makes donations for the jersey rotation, like that's important because like we don't get state funds for that and we don't take money from the general fund. It's all through like ticket sales, donations, activity, all that stuff, okay? Capital projects funds, we don't have that. We don't have a general obligation bond, so we don't have a debt bond, so we don't have that. The debt service fund, there's no levy on it. Ours is kind of deceptive. It's just money in and money out because that's the fund we have to code it to when we make payments and we have revenue bond payments, right? Okay? The nutrition fund, there's no levy on that. How do we get money in the nutrition fund?
I'm guessing every month when we all pay our,
Meal tickets.
Yep.
when we get that.
When you get the notice from that your student's meal account balances
You get some state
is
funds
low.
for that?
And then
Like
technically
free and
federal
reduced?
Federal.
funds. Yep. So those that are on free and reduced, we get reimbursed a full meal,
For that?
and that goes into the nutrition fund, and that is one of the primary contributors to that fund. But there's no levy on it. Sales, or the SAVE fund, there's no levy on that, but we do receive money. How do we get the money in that sales tax fund, which gives it away, or the SAVE fund? How do we get money there?
Tax.
Sales tax, right. And that's
That's the penny sales.
that penny sales tax.
And is that off your certified enrollment?
It is. They figure that statewide.
Yep.
And then they figure out, okay, they'll go back, I'll go back to that one screen, how many students there are statewide. This is how many dollars we collected in that Pennywise sales tax, so it's so much per student. And then here's your share based on your certified enrollment. Okay? So, for the upcoming fiscal year, we knew they set SSA at 2%. Okay? The general fund rate right there overall, the change I've talked about. The instructional support levy, the percentage is the same, but the levy rate to do that went down slightly because the cost went down slightly for that with increased assessed values, and we had a decrease in enrollment. The management fund, I do want you to notice that rate went down, but I'm going to point out in a second what we're asking for went up in a second here. But notice it went down 6 cents on this proposal, okay? The voted physical plant and equipment levy. So this past year, it was at 39 cents, and remember we fund some of that through the income surtax. For this next year, it'll be at 72 cents and change, so it went up 33 cents. Why did it go up 33 cents?
Well, we increased it.
Yes.
Right?
Yep, that's 100% due to the vote, right? We went from 67 cents to $1. So up 33 cents, and right there it is. Why it's not exact is it has to do with the money coming in from the income surtax and
what
stuff
I'm saying.
to make it equal,
Yeah.
right? But we're not going above $1, but it's just the estimates off that. The regular physical plant and equipment, that stays exactly the same. That's the board approved portion. And that's all it can be, okay? We don't have debt service. So when you add that up, as of this time, when we published this and what was in the Department of Management budget system, we were at 1153. That was going to be an increase of 78 cents. Okay, now when you look at it and you say, well, our voted PEPAL went up 33, that's not all the 78 cents. The majority of that is due to the budget guarantee and other budget shortfalls just through the formula, okay? However, that was great on that day. That's not an accurate number, but it's what we had as of the first hearing. Dollars wise, okay, this is the dollars that those generate. The additional dollars overall, I'm just pointing out, is 651,000. Okay, 300,000 and change of that comes from the budget guarantee. Okay, so that's where some of that increase comes from, and then 152,000 of that comes from the increase in the voted PEPAL. You add those two together, that's a majority of what that increase is right there. Okay, so management fund, just kind of showing with our dollars there for the next year, revenues and expenses. Okay, so it looks like our expenses are going to exceed our revenues by 400-some thousand, how the balance will go down. The last handful of years, we've pretty close to what we're going to spend is what we've asked for. We haven't asked for a lot extra, and we didn't this year. That could be slightly adjusted. The biggest reason that balance is going down is paying off a projected legal settlement. That's the biggest reason. And that's why the balance goes down. Not that we're overspending for other reasons, but that's what it's for, which will be talked about at a later date. Physical plant and equipment levy, revenues and expenditures, and then our balance going down. What's the main reason the expenditures are going up? There's no main reason. We just put it in for a budget so that if we end up spending more, we don't have to do an amended budget year before. We tried to put in enough expenditures so at the end of the year, our balance in the PEPAL would be at about 200,000. That's what it's been the last handful of years. It could end up being more than that. It's always okay if you spend less than what you budgeted expense-wise, but if you go over, then you have to do an amended hearing. So we didn't budget for as many projects this summer because up until March 3, I didn't know if
What
PEPAL
was
would
gonna
pass.
happen.
Right. So there's no hidden agenda there. That's just what the budget looks like.
And that was all PEPAL?
Yep,
That was
this is
total
just PEPAL. Yep.
But voted PEPAL and board said PEPAL.
Yes, correct. Sorry. Yes, both halves together, correct. Or both parts, not a
Yep.
half.
Yep.
The voted and the board approved. Yes. Activity fund. Honestly, I'm hoping we don't go below that, but our activity fund each year when we've ended is close to zero. That's why, like, our relationships with some of the other boosters and things and the donations they make, because that's, I mean, it's critical, and we're right now pretty much spending what we take in that account. I'm not crying or asking for more help. I'm just saying, we don't have a high balance in that account. And you want your kids to be successful, but anytime they are, there's always additional costs that you don't factor. So when you have a team make it to state, like our girls made it to cross country as an example, awesome. We want that to happen. But there's just always more costs when you go down for that, hotel rooms
Bus,
and things like
hotel.
that. Bus, hotel. Right now, the vocal jazz,
Yep.
right? I mean,
And then the speech.
state vocal jazz, speech, like those things, and I'm not complaining about that, I'm just saying, those are things that come out of that fund, right? So there's a lot of expenses in that. So this was maybe a conservative, hoping we don't spend more than that, and we might end up having to
Have a meeting.
having a meeting about that, right?
Was there a time that, didn't we have to transfer some money from the general fund to that fund at one point?
We
So,
do for safety equipment.
yes.
Oh, okay.
So during the year, when you buy certain types of safety equipment, you can have the general fund pay for that. I can't remember what month
Right.
we've approved that in.
Yeah, and during COVID, we could,
And there were some additional things during COVID, but what month is it we usually do that? Or some of they say, is it
because
June?
we never know, yeah, until
Okay.
the last.
Oh, June, okay. Where we've done that, I just know we haven't done it in a while. That we'll approve that. A lot of times we do that to keep the activity fund flush. So, debt service, this is strictly money out, money in. Money goes into it from the save account to pay off the revenue bonds. The reason there's a slight balance at the end is it's strictly from the interest earned from the money in our save accounts to go to pay that off. The nutrition fund, this is similar to the activity. I don't literally think it'll go down by this much. We have been the last few years intentionally spending it down because it was flush with cash and probably a little bit higher than it needed to be, but we had some equipment. We haven't bought as much this year, but the last 2 years, Jamie, you'll remember, and it was time. We've purchased some new kitchen equipment or replacement equipment, and so we've spent that balance down. Right now, I don't think there's anything to worry about. We'll probably end pretty close where we need to be. Not too worried about that. Sales tax or the save fund, the biggest reason this is going down, just guessing, we knew at the end of this last year coming into this year, our save account was way higher than what we projected it to be because of the timing of bills with the project, right? Because we started that project last fiscal year and finished it in this fiscal year. And then there's still some bills because of retainage that we haven't paid yet that we're holding on to. So that's some of the reason that those expenditures would be higher than the revenues going into next year. It just depends on timing of bills, things like that. We will always traditionally carry a bigger balance in that moving forward for the next foreseeable future, about 15 years. We have to keep a certain percentage of what we had as that we borrowed in revenue bonds. So it was roughly $6 million. So we have about $600,000 that we have to keep in a separate save account. That's just required as a percentage of the project that will sit there for the next 15 years. We can use the interest, but we can't touch that. So we should almost always have higher than a $600,000 balance in that account for that very reason. Anything you wanted to add to that I misspoke on there, right? So, getting to the end here. So these are all the non-general fund, really, out of all those accounts. These are only things that add to our general fund rate. So the management account, okay, we did ask for a few more dollars in that on this version, but due to the increased assessed values and things like that, that rate went down. Voted PEPAL, right there, you guys have answered that. It went up from 39 cents to 72 cents because the voters approved, going from 67 cents to $1. And so there's that 33 cents. And then the board approved portion is at 33 cents. There's no other part. So when you add that together, that's where I got the 1154. Now, that's not accurate because not all the numbers were finalized at the moment we had to finalize the budget. The bill had been signed but not approved. We voted to approve extending voted PEPAL on Tuesday, March 3. The budget was due on Thursday, March 5 at 4 p.m. And legislation also passed like on Wednesday or Tuesday of that week that they didn't have finalized until March 16 or 17, which was after the taxpayer statements were sent out. So
Makes it tough.
yeah, right? So we know the rate's not the same. So getting back to your question, so the legislature basically, here's what I kind of I stole this from Ms. Fisk, but they didn't follow their own deadline. They're supposed to have it done 30 days after the governor gives her condition of the state speech and then have that set. They didn't. So thus, the Department of Management system wasn't up to date. We couldn't show the impacts of the legislation without manipulating data, which we weren't intending to do, but you can't do that. So to be open and honest, we just put where it was at that point, knowing it wasn't all accurate. So if anyone's here, we're glad they're here. So it shows that the rate's at 11.53. It's going to actually be more likely very close to what it was this past year, 10.75.
Holy Moses.
It's going to be a little lower. We can raise levy rates. So coming into the second hearing, which we'll talk about in April, we could really use a little more in our management fund. So we added a few thousand into that. But even doing that, we're going to end up within a few pennies as of right now, pending any other legislative changes. I can't predict that. We're going to be pretty close to 10.75.
Even with the PEPAL.
Yes, even with, that's factoring the increase in the PEPAL, yes, yes. With everything, yep. So this shows our property tax rate history as of when we published the budget. However, it's not gonna be accurate. We'll adjust it for next year because that rate's gonna really be, you know, it might be 10.75 or 10.78, but I'm saying pretty close to 10.75.
So this is a second hearing, right?
There's a second hearing, yep.
And it'll be a correct?
It'll be
for that?
correct on that, yep,
Okay.
the rate will be correct that night. We're actually, we're waiting for this to get done.
Yep.
We don't have school Friday, Good Friday, right? So we'll finalize the stuff for hearing number 2, the budget numbers and stuff the next few days, because then we have to publish that and then turn that into the papers, because it has to be in your papers 10 to 20 days before the hearing.
Gotcha.
And the papers, our local papers always want that by Friday so that they can publish the next week. So the hearing notice will be in next week's paper, which is the beginning of April already.
Fun to be had.
Yeah. So this was that notice that I shared at the beginning. So people will see portions of this. It's going to show their rate is 11.53 because that's what it was when hearing notice 1 was published. That's not, this is why thanks to the state for this. And this is true of every district, not just Sibley Ocheyedan, but that's not what our rate's going to be, which makes it equally confusing.
So will the state send out another notification with the adjustment?
Well, they know. We don't have to, the second hearing notice doesn't have to be sent out to taxpayers, but it'll be published, and the published notice will have the correct rate in it.
Gotcha.
Why would you admit?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they just back this up then, right? I mean, is there a reason it has to be, I mean, we're talking fiscal
Why
year.
would they have extended
Yeah,
your
right.
deadline?
They
for
missed
that?
their deadline, let's extend back this deadline so you don't
Wonderful question.
jump through these hoops to,
Or have
or
misinformation.
false
again, right? Like,
information.
If they want this deadline and us to have because they figure out March 15 is the date that everything has to be turned into your county auditor. They take the tax hearings notices and send them out. And that's for all entities, schools, counties, cities, right?
March
Okay.
5. March 5.
But March 15 is when she has to have them sent out, right?
They have to have them out, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I thought you meant we had to have them.
We have to have it done by March 5. Yes, correct. Because it has to be done, I think it's 10 days before the deadline for the auditor, right? So that's where they go from. So ideally, wouldn't the state legislators set the budget in time so you'd know by that date? But since this has been in place, they haven't done that yet. Yeah, I kind of forgot about that last year when I was preparing this and looking at the numbers, and I was looking at our SSA numbers that I had in the presentation. I'm like, these are all wrong. When I was, and I'm like, why did I do that? And I then I remembered, oh, it's because we were guessing what it was, and they said it after the hearing. And I kind of forgot about it when I was starting out here, because I was guessing it too, and it ended up at like 2.25 or something like that last year. So why don't they? Great question. I would like to know the answer.
A quick question on the voted PEPAL, the income surtax portion. When is that figured?
Like, what do you mean by when is it figured?
Like, so like, we approved $1. It's at 72 cents, right?
Yes.
The difference is that income surtax
Of a-
portion change every year?
Yeah. This one is based off of 2024.
Yes.
So,
It's
like,
it's a behind.
Yep.
So like we're paying Everybody's doing their 25 taxes now.
Yep.
It's going off what was paid in 24.
That's why we're pausing, because it's confusing. 'Cause the
It's
years do
behind,
not-
right?
It's
It's
behind
not-
and the years do not match up. So for this current year, it was based off of the collected surtaxes from the FY 24's, fiscal 2024's taxes, right? Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
You gotta think through, it's a year off, it is confusing.
So it's based off of 24's taxes, but we get it for 27, FY 27.
Correct.
So
You're
it's-
more than,
Yeah, I mean, you could say
But-
2 years off almost. Yes.
okay.
Yep. So that's, because, yeah, going into this too, it's taken me a little bit to figure that, because I'm like, how do they know that? What everyone's gonna pay, because you gotta kind of know what everyone's taxes are to have an income surtax off that for us to know what we're collecting, right?
Yep.
So that's why it lags so far behind.
And I'm sure that there's extensions on, you know, income taxes and
Yeah, I get
You're
that.
not even, or people that didn't pay it on time, you know what I mean? I'm not even factoring that in. One thing to note will be interesting in the future, as Iowa has lowered the state income tax rate, okay? Which is great, I'm not saying anything by this, other than, that means they're gonna collect less state income tax, right? The surtax is a tax on a tax, right?
Right.
So all other things considered, if they take in less state individual
Income tax.
taxes and we surtax on that, your income
Less.
surtax dollars coming in is gonna be less. So that could factor and change your rate in future years.
Right.
Dollars wise, it's, like I said, it's the same, but it could mean that
A difference
Just where they're
in
coming
play-
from.
coming
yep,
from.
the property taxes might be a little higher to offset that, because you may not be getting as much relief. Now, I've also heard people say, well, we think because of the reduced taxes and other things, Iowans will be taking in more income. So even at a lower tax rate, that'll be offset. Who knows?
But
I
like
don't know.
population change could definitely drive that,
But if you have, less population, you're gonna also take in less income.
or the other way.
Or the other way.
Right, like,
Increase in population, you'll take in more income, absolutely, which are things you don't know.
right.
And that's not even just our school enrollment, we're just talking in general.
Yeah, just people.
Right, just
Yeah.
people,
Okay.
yeah. So, a lot of information there, tried to make it, but yeah, school budgets are unique, it's not just a dollar, it's, you're really working through how much authority you have. And once you have the authority, then you're really going back on the other side and figuring out the taxes or the levies to pay for it. It's kind of unique that way, in how it's generated. You gotta do one to do the other, it's, yes, we gotta have dollars with that, but you first figure out, in Iowa, you have to figure out as a school how much authority you have. And then the dollars come after that. They figure out how they're gonna fund that authority. Now, during the year, there's been various points that we qualify for some additional things. Board approves it where we can get some additional authority during the year. So maybe we overspend, we will overspend on your special ed. So our budget or our authority is 730,000, okay? We're gonna overspend that. Okay, I'll tell you right now, we will, right? So what happens when you overspend that, you don't get cash, but you can get that authority back. Because you really don't have a choice to not overspend if that was what was called for in a student's IEP, or that's what the needs were, as an example. There's other times where we've come and we qualify for additional things and the board approves authority. It doesn't give us cash, but it gives us additional authority. And that's an important part of the budget process. Excuse me, that happens each year. So, other questions you guys have? That is all I have.
All right, well, thank you.
Thanks for the info.
All right.
All right,
I'll make a motion to adjourn the special budget meeting.
Second?
All right, it's been moved in second to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? All right, we are adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Yep, thank
Thanks,
you.
Dan.